Hello everyone, and welcome to another CaptainJimiPie Reads. Before I start today's reading, I thought I'd give you all a little bit of background on what I'm actually reading today. Originally, I wrote this short story in 2010 when the mysteries surrounding the Doctor's involvement in the Time War were still very much mysteries. Using evidence we knew at the time, I pieced together this short story which chronicled my ideas for the 8th to 9th Doctor's regeneration. However, once the 50th anniversary came along, this story of course became null and void. As such, certain details of the story may contradict what we now know. Nonetheless, I certainly hope you all enjoy my own interpretation of what was once a missing regeneration. The ultimate sanction has failed! Rassilon's gauntlet slammed down onto the table. The resonating bang brought silence around the Time Lords present. Rassilon's head shot in the direction of the second. What of our Lord Master? The second paused and spoke quietly. No sign of him, my Lord President. He wasn't present with us when we came back through the link, so we don't think he came back through with us. He burnt up his own life force, stopping— Silence! Rassilon bellowed. I cannot be stopped! What of our Lord Doctor? The second paused again, longer this time. Well? Rassilon's booming voice once again broke the silence. The second did not meet his gaze. His incarnation we met on planet Earth did not come back through with us, and Rassilon's eyes narrowed, his voice calm yet full of anger. What of his incarnation within the Time War? The second spoke in a barely audible tone. He has taken his TARDIS at the moment, and the Great Key. Rassilon's eyes widened. What? He stood, looming over those around the table, casting his gaze over all present. I will not die! The Cloister Bell rang out as the Doctor, dishevelled and grimy, dashed around the TARDIS console, unravelling cables and connecting them to the moment. The room was flashing red and orange, with warning signs and flames mixing together in a haze of heat and noise. Come on, old girl. The Doctor affectionately patted one of the metal columns supporting the central column. The TARDIS groaned and wheezed, sparks flying from the central console. Suddenly, an alarm blared, and the Doctor looked up, panic in his eyes. No, 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 no! He raced around the other side of the console, taking his sonic screwdriver out of his pocket as he did so. Come on! Come on! He fiddled with its controls with one hand while punching buttons and twisting dials on the console with the other. He ran around to the moment, which was now connected to the console by at least 30 different cables and other strange attachments. The Great Key suspended in the moment's time lock feed. Time slowed as the Doctor raised his sonic and pointed it. He heard the buzz, saw the glow of the moment, and as he extended the sonic further, the glow increased, and the Great Key began to turn. A sudden shower of sparks, and the screwdriver dropped from his hand, a charred, mangled mess on the floor. But the Doctor didn't care. Lights were flashing. Flames and explosions were causing devastation to the console room. But all he could hear was the Cloister Bell, and all he knew was the moment was ready. This was it. The end of the last great Time War. And he would make it happen. He would be at the very heart of the moment's effects, as would his TARDIS. He didn't know what would happen to him, but he knew what would happen to the Time Lords, and the Daleks, and all of the nightmares the war had produced. They would be destroyed, erased from history. The war would become time-locked, never to be entered or left by anyone or anything. He would never be able to change what would happen, and he would be the one to make it happen. Romana, Susan, Leela, so many people he loved, he would sacrifice them to end the war. He couldn't do it. How could he bring death to those he loved? But in his heart and mind, he knew it would mean death to everything and everyone if the Time Lords succeeded in their plan. He had seen so much evil and destruction in the war, but it would be his own people who would bring about the worst travesty of all. He knew what he had to do. The moment was ready. The Doctor awoke on the floor of the TARDIS. It was dark, no lights, no flames, the gentle thrum of the central column as it raised and lowered. The The moment had disappeared, no trace of its former presence, like it had never happened. But he knew it had. In his head he could feel it. He was alone. The Time Lords were no more, as were the Daleks. He stood, his body feeling weak and battered, his clothes torn, grubby and burnt in places. He could feel it. He knew what was coming. Calmly, he half walked, half limped around the console, setting the controls to land. Anywhere, he didn't care. Anywhere to get as far away as possible, just as it had all started for him. The Doctor breathed a sigh of relief, but it was not content. His actions weighed heavy on his mind. He might be about to become a new man, but his guilt wouldn't leave him as easily. His face and hands started to glow. His breathing became heavier. He felt his body jolt, his head thrown back and his arms outstretched, as a golden haze swam over his eyes. Steve Hudson walked along the pavement, coming back from his late shift. This road was always so dark and dreary. He especially hated the fact that they'd started building on the other side of the road, some kind of housing development. Which meant he'd have to cross the road and walk well out of his way just to get around the site. He remembered his father telling him it used to be a scrap merchant's, Foreman's, was it? He couldn't quite remember. Either way, 76 Totters Lane would soon become flats, another old area taken over by steel and concrete. He stopped and tugged his jacket around him. A sudden wind had blown up, and he thought he could hear a wheezing, grating noise. Probably just some metal sheeting in the site being vibrated by the wind. He'd seen inside the site during the daytime. It was always a huge mess, wooden joists, piles of cement and sheets of metal scattered about. As he rounded the corner, someone bumped into him. "Which way you going, mate?" Steve said, taking a step back. He looked the man up and down. He seemed to be in his mid to late 40s, shaved black hair with rather large ears and nose. The strangest thing about him were his clothes. He was wearing a grey waistcoat and trousers and a frilled shirt, almost Edwardian. His clothes were dishevelled and dirty, like he'd just woken up in a skip. Steve held a hand to the man's shoulder. He seemed very disorientated and was mumbling to himself. "Someone's had one too many," Steve thought to himself. "You okay, mate?" he asked the strange man. The man suddenly seemed to regard Steve for the first time. But Steve noticed a great sadness and distress in eyes much older than the face they occupied. "They're all gone. I'm the only one left." The stranger spoke quietly, but clearly, repeating the words to himself, like he was trying to remember them. Steve steadied him as he began to sway. "What was it? Fancy dress pub crawl? Lose your friends?" The man suddenly turned away and stumbled back down the street before stopping and leaning against a tall blue police box. Steve recognised it as similar to the one he'd seen outside Earl's Court tube station, but this one seemed older and almost like it didn't belong here. He couldn't recall ever seeing it before. It also seemed to be radiating small wisps of smoke, but maybe he was imagining it. The strange man patted the side of the box and mumbled to himself. Steve couldn't quite catch what he said. Something about the effects of a moment and taking time to rebuild. He must really have had a lot to drink. Steve watched him as he pocketed a strange old key and then stumbled on down the street, still talking to himself. With one last look at the strange blue box, Steve turned around and carried on home.